9 mistakes to avoid when renting out your property. Towards the end of this video, you're going to learn how to prevent unnecessary losses related to money, time, your sleep, and unnecessary tears. First mistake, not having reserve funds. If you're brand new to this and you just closed on your rental property, congratulations. However, you will eventually learn that renting out a property is not something that can be done overnight. It's something that will take time, sometimes a month, sometimes 2, sometimes even 3, depending on the market and the type of prospects that you get. And for that reason, it is extremely important for you to keep reserve funds to make those mortgage payments in the meantime while you're waiting for that great tenant to show up. And if you happen to be a real estate investor for quite some time, experience must have shown you that sometimes tenants don't renew their lease. And when that happens, you will go through a process of renovating the property if necessary, and then going through the whole tenant selection process, which can sometimes take a few months. And even if your property is not currently vacant and you have a tenant in place, sometimes things break down. For example, recently, my tenant just called me and told me that the HVAC stopped working, and I've had this tenant for at least 5 years. So it doesn't have anything to do with the tenant not being careful. It's just a matter of normal wear and tear and extreme temperatures. And when I went out and did the quote that I got was ranging somewhere between $6,000 to $10,000 to get this fixed. If I didn't have any reserve funds, then I will pretty much be in an uncomfortable situation. Now, I have a tip for you to help you complement those reserve funds. Take advantage of 0% credit cards. That way you can make the repairs, pay that with the credit card, and then you have a couple of months in advance to slowly pay down that debt with your rental income without having to worry about interest rates. Welcome to Nova Rice, your channel for financial education. In here, we talk about investments in real estate, investments in the stock market, in precious metals, and small businesses. Next mistake, not being patient and renting out your property to the first person that just shows up the door. Renting your property out, it's like getting into a marriage contract. The person or the family that walks into your roof can potentially make your life easier by helping you create passive income, or it can make your life like hell if you happen to rent out to the wrong tenant. So why not take the time to carefully evaluate all your prospects and select the right candidate for you? After all, isn't that what people do before they get married? They go on dates, they get to know the person. Some people do get married within a year, some within 5, some even up to 10 years. But of course, I know that in the rental business, you probably don't have a year, let alone 10 years. So there are ways that you can expedite the process, be fast, yet careful enough as long as you evaluate each tenant with patience. And that leads me to the next mistake, not having your financial requisites defined for the prospect tenant. This step is very important because it's what's going to allow you to get to know your prospect in a very short period of time. And it will also help you stay away from trouble because there are certain categories that are protected from discrimination. These are race, color, religion, nationality, sex, and that includes sexual orientation, family status, and that includes family with children and disability. In my years of experience, sometimes I hear landlords saying, I don't like to rent out my property to families with children because they always end up breaking something. And while that might be true based on their experience, you have to be very careful not to say that to the prospect because you can get fined by the city for discrimination. And in my experience, if you have those financial requisites well defined, you will attract a certain type of tenant. And even though the family comes with children, chances are that these are responsible people that are raising responsible children. Now, among the requisites that I have is 1, I ask for 3 times the annual rent as their income. So let's say, for example, if your rent is $2,000 a month, you multiply that by 12 and you get $24,000. And then you take that number and you multiply that by 3 and you will get $72,000. That's the income that prospect or the family has to make in order to afford living in your rental property. That ratio will show that they have enough to cover their personal expenses as well as paying the rent. The next requisite I have is that the prospect has to have a FICO credit score of 720 or above. And if for whatever reason they don't have that, I do ask for the equivalent of 12 months of bank statements. Why the bank statements? Because in those bank statements, I will see how often the prospect gets paid and how timely they actually pay their bills. So it's kind of like getting a credit score, but you're actually analyzing their behavior in real time. You're seeing how often they get paid, how regularly they get paid, because the last thing you want is for a prospect that gets paid in January and then the next time they get paid is not until May, and then so on. You want consistent income in your prospect, and you also want to be able to check that they're paying their bills on time. Call it their cell phone bills or water bill, electric bill, you name it. Those are the two most important ones. Of course, there are plenty of other requisites, but I'm not going to go into detail. Otherwise, this video will get very long. But if you are interested in finding out what those are, here's a video that I created a couple of months ago that you're more than welcome to check after we're done with this video. Next mistake, not investing in a good lease contract. A strong lease contract will have clauses that are going to protect you and also dictate what should be done in the event of a late payment, surprise tenants, which I will share a story about that later, or your tenant wanting to get out of a lease before the end of the contract, or anything related to that rental. This is very important because you always have to plan for the worst. In fact, my rental agreements are usually 9 pages long. I've heard countless stories of people signing or issuing rental agreements of just 1 or 2 pages. That's not enough to include all there is to be included and to help with any type of problem solving in the event that some problems come up. And just to give you a little bit of context, I had some friends a while ago that they came to me with a 2-page lease and they were asking me, hey, how do you think I should fill up this lease? When I looked at it, I said, you know what? I'm not the right person to help you with this because I'm not a real estate attorney, but I think you should invest, in a good consultation, take that 2-pager to a real estate attorney to help you strengthen it, right? Include whatever necessary clauses there are, because I don't think your lease is strong enough. And literally, this person just looked at me and just turned around and talked to the next person on the table and asked, hey, how do you think I should be filling this up? And I was like, fine, this is what they want to do, right? So fast forward, I heard that they ended up renting to a large group of people who wind up not being what they expected. So what happened was that they rented out to a quote unquote large family, and there was a head of household, meaning a person that signed the lease and the one that was responsible for it. And it turns out that that person just moved out and never informed my friends. And on top of that, he assigned someone else within that household to be the head of household. That in itself is a problem because the person who originally signed the lease is not there. So in the event of any legal issues, my friends were not able to find the person that was responsible for it. And anyone who lived there was not necessarily the point person. So in the event of an eviction or wanted to take matters to court, you really didn't really have a point person that actually signed that lease. So depending on the state that you are, that could work in your favor or against you. And in the case of New York City, that was definitely working against my friends. And the story doesn't end there. The problems keep getting bigger and bigger. So this person started subleasing the rooms to other random people. And that leads to the next mistake, not including the name of every person that resides in that house. When you're signing a lease, the name of every single individual, including minors, should be noted in the lease. That way you will know who's the mom, who's the dad, who's the grandparent, who is the child and the second child, because otherwise, anyone could be living in that house. And that's exactly what happened. So the new head of household, which wasn't necessarily the real head of household per the contract, started subleasing the rooms in that apartment. And one time, my friend bumped into this lady who he has never seen before. And when he asked her, hey, how do you get the keys to the house? This person just said, oh, I just spoke to this person and he said I can move in. So I just moved in earlier this week and he gave me copies of the keys. So imagine how dangerous this can be because you haven't run the background check on this person. You don't know if this person is a criminal or whatever is it that they're planning to do or their intention. And it turns out that this person is living in the same roof that you are living in. Because in the case of my friends, they bought a 2-family home. So they were living in one floor and they were renting out the other. Now, some might wonder, how did they wind up with this type of tenant? Well, very easy. It turns out that the original head of household was a friend of a friend who was referred to them. So that leads me to the next mistake. Do not rent out to friends or to people that just simply get along well with you in the first interview without respecting your financial requisites. You have to make your decision based on the requisites that you determine, the credit, the income. We're not in this business to make friends. We're in this business to make money. So all of your decisions must be based on business decisions. And in my experience, when you mix friendship with money, that usually doesn't end well. Next mistake, not enforcing the penalties dictated by the contract. And this applies usually to late fees, right? So let's say rent is due the first of the month, but your tenant decided to pay you on the 10th, right? So every time the tenant pays late, you're supposed to charge a late fee for late payment. So that way it's an incentive for them not to do it again. But if you let it go the first time, then the second time, don't get mad when the 5th month comes in and your tenant still pays whenever they feel like it, because you allowed it to happen the first couple of times without enforcing the contract terms. And that applies to everything that is within the contract, whether it's a late fee or any other penalty fee dictated by damages done to the property or things to that matter. In fact, don't rely on the fact that, oh, maybe because you have a property inside an LLC that you're fully protected. An LLC is a shell that's going to give you legal protection. But if your practices are not in line with whatever is determined in the contract, that LLC means nothing, because your actions is what's going to determine how strong that LLC is. Next mistake, not responding to communications in a timely manner. For emergencies, you should always respond within the hour. And for any regular upkeep or maintenance, you should be responding to your tenant within 24 hours. Just think about this. Imagine an emergency. Imagine one of your water pipes broke. That could make a difference between flooding and damaging your property completely to the point that you will have to replace all walls, and potentially having to reimburse your tenant for damaged furniture. Remember, this is a service. Not only you are providing a roof over their head in exchange of a rental income, but you also need to provide a livable space. Next mistake, not maintaining records of communications or projects that were done or completed. If communication happened by text, you should always send out a recap by email, so that way you can keep a consistent communication trail. If the communication already happened via email, perfect, just keep it as it is. And if you are a professional property manager, or if you're working with a property management company, they typically use softwares for property managers. So whatever communication that happened between them and the tenant is housed in the software, and they should have records of that as well. In terms of repairs or maintenance, you should always maintain a folder with copies of the receipts of anything that you replace or any labor that you pay for, because at the end of the year, you're going to take those receipts and you're going to provide them to your accountant so that you can take those deductions on that rental income and help you save on taxes. And there you have it, 9 mistakes that you should definitely avoid when renting out your property. And for those who want to learn more about the proper way to find a good tenant and rent out your property, here's a video that I created a couple of months ago, and I hope you enjoy it. I'll see you over there. Take care. Bye-bye.